Hello students, Professor Benavides here. Let's go over the last part of chapter 5, if statements. So I'm calling this last part, part 3, if statements with lists. We'll also talk about styling, and we'll go over the summary a little bit about this whole chapter. So using if statements with lists, why combine lists with if statements? Well, there's 3 reasons. You can watch for a special value, you can manage changing conditions, and you can also begin to prove that your code works as expected. Let's zero in on checking for special items. Now, here, what you're looking at is the code below, or this code here, does not check for a special item. And then we're going to go ahead and see, I have a before and then an after. So let's look at it in this before state. We're not doing a check. And usually when you say check, you mean if, right? You're checking for something with an if. So for right now, let's look at this code that doesn't check for anything. What does it do? What does it do? It displays a message as the pizza is being made. But the problem is, what if the pizzeria runs out of green peppers? Major tragedy, right? So, on line 5, we list the toppings that the customer has requested. And then on line 8, we go ahead and loop through that list as we're adding the items. So what happens here is there's no check to see if we're out of green peppers. So how would we do that check? We do that with an if statement. Let's look at the next one on here. Let me run it. So basically, mushrooms, we got them, right? We don't have green peppers. So we say, sorry, we're out of green peppers right now. And then we add the cheese and finish making the pizza. Okay, when you're making a pizza for me, you got to put anchovies on it. I know maybe some of you all like that, but that's what I like on my pizza, right? But anyway, what's different on this one compared to the other one is on line 7 we have our test, and what we're doing here is we're checking to see if the requested topping, which is singular in this list. A lot of people are still trying to get used to the Python style. We've got singular and plural, right? So the list is plural. Every item should be singular. Don't use I, okay? Or X. So we perform a test here. We use the test for equality with 2 equal signs if it's equal to green peppers. If so, then we say, sorry, we're out of green peppers right now. And of course, that information probably would have come from another source. Else we say we're adding. In other words, if we have it, we'll add it. Okay? So this is how we check for a special kind of condition. What about checking that a list is not empty? Let's go on to the next one on here. So here we check to see if a list is empty before entering the loop. So this line 5, we're already setting the stage. We're creating an empty list, right? This is new here, or sort of new. We're saying if requested underscore toppings. This check results in a Boolean, a condition. And as we know that the conditions are going to be either true or false. So if there's anything in here, it'll return true. If there isn't anything in there, it'll return false. Let's go ahead and run it. And then we'll say, are you sure you want plain pizza? I like plain pizza, especially if it's got some good cheese, some good real mozzarella, maybe in a brick oven. That'll do it for me. You know what I mean? So what we have here on line 7 is a test followed by an embedded loop. So if the condition on line 7 is true, then it drops down, it goes and into the loop. Else, it'll go to line 11 and print, are you sure you want plain pizza? Okay. Let's talk about using multiple lists. And this one, I was very impressed with this idea here. We got 2 lists, multiple lists. People call them parallel lists. So we've got 2 lists, one called available toppings, one called the requested toppings. So this is what the customer wants. They want French fries. I mean, is that like a total sin or what? I mean, there's just some things that shouldn't be on pizza. I don't know about you, but I can't handle barbecue on pizza. Beans, give me a break, right? Pizza needs to be pizza. But anyway, this guy wants French fries. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're kind of reversing. Before we had an if and then a loop, then we had the loop embedded in it. Here we're going to have a loop on the outside, and we're going to have an embedded if. So we're adding the mushrooms. We're going through every. Look at the way this goes. This is really neat logic here. On line 6, we say for requested toppings in requested toppings, fine. What we're going to do is go through each one of these, and we're going to say if the requested topping is in available toppings. So we're going through each one of these, and we're going to see that French fries is not one of the ones on here. It's not olives. It's not green peppers. It's not pineapple. Okay? So in that case, we'll add it. Else, we'll say, sorry, we don't have French fries. And we're printing the finished making your pizza on here. Now, I wonder if I did that right. Finish making, adding extra cheese. Did I do this right? Let me see. Oh, I did right. That's looking. Let's see how it goes here. So here's her test. Else, sorry, we didn't have. And this finish. Where's this adding extra cheese come from? Oh yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, because if you'll notice here, the requested toppings are mushroom, French fries, and extra cheese. So the first time it comes in here, it says we're adding the mushrooms. Fine. And then it says, sorry, we didn't have French fries. Right? And then it says finish making your pizza. And then the next time it goes to this, it says adding next. Something is not right here, guys. I would have thought that the finish making your pizza would be outside the loop. Let me go ahead and put that there. Now, in this particular case, I think it kind of runs better. It's adding the mushrooms. Sorry, we don't have French fries. We're adding the cheese. It just didn't seem right. I must have put that in the wrong place. And no, I didn't do this on purpose. But this is an excellent example of how the indentation matters. Yeah, indentation matters on here. So. So this looks a lot better on here, and this is on page 88 of your book. I hope this is the way I was supposed to do it. If not, I'm changing it this way. Okay. So now that brings us into the try it yourselves. So the try it yourselves, we're going to do the 8.5, and let me go ahead and run that. In this particular case, we've got a list, and then we have an outer loop and an embedded if. So when we run this, it says, hello, Eric, thank you for logging in. But when it finds admin, it'll go ahead and say, do you want a status report? So we perform a test, just like we were saying on line 4, if username is equal to admin. So as we're going through every particular person on here, once it gets to admin, it'll say this. Otherwise, it'll say, hello, username, thank you for logging in again, which is what we got for our output. That's 5.8. Excellent example. 5.9, let's go ahead and run that right away. In this particular one, no users. It's done on purpose. Line 1, we have a list. And then we perform a test on line 3. And if that test is true, we drop into the loop. But in this particular case, we don't, right? We go ahead and go to the else clause and say we need to find some users, because as we can see here, usernames is blank, or there's nothing in username. So line 3 should be returning false. And if it is false, the else clause fires. Now that brings us to do-it-yourself 5.10. Let me go ahead and look at all the code on here and run it. So we've got 2 lists here. I love these 2 list examples. So they're great. We've got current users and new users. Very powerful on here. So what we're going to do here is, before we assign like allow a username, we're going to check if the new user's name is in the current users. So we're going to go ahead and do a loop. Now there's 2 ways to do this. On line 5, I used a list comprehension, and as you can see, it's kind of terse. So I went ahead and did it the long way, all right, with no list comprehension. So I created my list and I did my loop on here, and I do another loop and I perform a test on here. If the new user lower, in other words, we want to do all lowercase, in other words, like Willie, because everything's case sensitive, right? This is based on the ASCII table. We're having a comparison of strings, and it's character by character, and a big W, capital W, is not the same, does not have the same ASCII number as a little letter W. Okay, so what we want to do is be on the same wavelength, if you will. So in order to do that, we'll use the method called lower. So we'll say if new user dot lower in current users. So in other words, if you want to have a username like somebody else has already got it, guess what? Sorry, that name's taken. Else we'll say great, it's still available. So now you know how it's done. Of course, if you want to go ahead and do the list comprehension, all you have to do is just comment this out and just do that one little line of code. Some people like the list comprehension, some people don't. This last example was kind of neat. 5-11, do it yourself. So the ordinal numbers indicate their position in a list, such as, first, second. Most ordinal numbers end in th, except for 1, 2, and 3. So, if you ever thought about how to program this, if you were looping through this. So if it's the number 1, we're going to say first. If it's the number 2, we'll say second. If it's the number 3, we'll say third, right? But then everything else, we'll go ahead and just add th. Go ahead and run that, and it runs beautiful. Really neat algorithm on here. First, second, third. And then we have 4th, 5th, all the way to 9th. Beautiful. All right, so that brings us to styling our code. And basically the idea here is that the only recommendation that PEP 8 provides for styling conditional tests is to use a single space around the comparison operators. So in other words, you don't want to have everything all crunched up. So in other words, like line 6. This is the correct way of doing line 6. I have a space right here and a space after the comparison operator. I could go ahead and write it this way. And this is not going to be a syntactical error. But it's not complying with PEP 8. So, so such spacing does not affect the way Python interprets your code. It just makes your code easier for you and others to read. And it gets more difficult if you don't space one side and then you space the other side. Again, if you run it, it's not going to do any, it's not going to be a syntax error. it just kind of like throws you a little bit, when you look at it. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that you want to go ahead and comply with, since it is part of PEP 8. Now the try it yourselves 5.12 and 5.13, it just asks you to review your programs and make sure that they're styled right. And 5.13 is to consider for you to start thinking about different kinds of problems that you would want to solve. So that brings us to the summary for this chapter. We covered lots of things, and I did cut it up into 3 parts. You learned about how to write conditional tests in part 1, right? Which always evaluate to true or false. You learned to write simple if statements, if else chains, and if elif else chains. That was in part 2. You began to use these structures to identify particular conditions you needed to test and to know when those conditions have been met in your programs. You also learned how to handle certain items in the list differently. That was the part 3, right? Than all other items, while continuing to utilize the efficiency of a for loop. And then lastly, we revisited the Python style recommendations to ensure that your increasingly complex programs are still relatively easy to read and understand. So that brings us to, what are we going to cover next time? Well, we'll talk about chapter 6. In chapter 6, we'll learn all about Python dictionaries. And a dictionary is similar to a list, but allows you to connect pieces of information. You'll learn how to build dictionaries, loop through them, and use them in combinations with lists and if statements. Learning about dictionaries will enable you to model even a wider variety of real-world situations. Okay, well, my friends, that's chapter 5. Thank you very much.